Under the burning skies of a galaxy ruled by dragons, where fire was not just an element but a weapon of control, a single human girl moved quietly through the echoing halls of the Dragon Emperor's palace. She was only a maid, or at least that was all anyone believed her to be. She carried buckets, polished the floors, cleaned the great throne of the emperor himself, and bowed lower than anyone else in the palace. To most, she was invisible, a shadow in the background of power. But those who looked closely, those who passed by her in the long corridors, often felt an unease they could not explain. Her presence was soft, yet it carried weight, and even the strongest guards found themselves avoiding her eyes. No one knew her name. They only called her the Human Maid. The Dragon Emperor, ruler of fire fleets and iron armies, never cared for servants. To him, humans were fragile creatures, useful only for labor. Yet one night, in the silence of his golden throne room, his gaze was pulled toward her. She had bent low to clean the polished black stone at the steps of his throne, and as her plain robe shifted, he saw something that should not have been there. Across her back, carved deep into her flesh, were scars, scars shaped not by accident or whip, but by design. Lines, curves, and sharp edges connected like symbols of a language older than the palace itself. The emperor froze. These marks were not simple wounds. He had seen them before, long ago, on forbidden relics locked away by his ancestors. They were the marks of the first fire, the lost script of those who once ruled before the dragons. For the first time in years, the emperor's heart felt unsteady. He asked her, his voice sharp and commanding, where she had gotten those scars. But she did not answer. She continued to clean, her head bowed, as if his question had not reached her ears. The silence cut through the room more dangerously than any reply could have. The emperor's eyes narrowed. He dismissed the guards, though their claws gripped their weapons nervously as they left. Alone with her, he asked again. Still, nothing. She simply looked up at him once, and in her eyes there was no fear, only a deep stillness, as if she carried secrets too heavy for words. The emperor ordered his spies to investigate. Records were searched, planets were scanned, but nothing was found. It was as if she had appeared from nothing. She had no birth, no family, no history. Rumors spread through the palace like fire on dry leaves. Some whispered she was a spy sent by rival dragon clans. Others believed she was cursed. A few even muttered that she was not human at all. The emperor said nothing, but his thoughts circled her scars like a predator around prey. He began to keep her close, not out of trust, but out of suspicion. He needed answers. Days turned to weeks, and strange things began to happen. Machines long broken would flicker back to life when she touched them. A dragon soldier who had been near death breathed strong again after she walked past his chamber. At night, faint light seemed to glow from the scars on her back, as though the symbols themselves were alive. The emperor saw it with his own eyes, and he felt something he had not felt in centuries: fear. When he finally confronted her again, demanding to know the truth, her lips moved for the first time. She whispered only 6 words: "These are not scars, they are keys." The emperor's blood turned cold. Keys? Keys to what? He pressed her for answers, but her eyes lowered again, and she said nothing more. That night, he could not sleep. His dreams were haunted by visions of firestorms and shattered galaxies, by voices of his ancestors warning him of the first fire, the great power that had been sealed away so long ago. He began to wonder if the empire itself rested on a lie, if dragons were not rulers by birthright, but tools created for a greater purpose. The next day, when he summoned her again, her eyes no longer seemed human. They carried an ancient weight, as if they had seen empires rise and burn to ash. Slowly, she revealed fragments of her secret. Long before dragons claimed the stars, there had been another race, the Star Architects, builders of worlds, masters of codes and energy. They had designed the dragons as soldiers, living weapons of fire and destruction. But when the architects vanished, the dragons seized power and declared themselves rulers. She was no ordinary maid. She was a survivor, a remnant of that ancient race, hiding in human form, her scars a map, a code that could awaken the weapon the architects left behind. The emperor stood in silence, torn between rage and awe. His entire empire, everything his ancestors had sworn to protect, might be nothing but stolen power. He should have killed her then, erased the threat she posed. But instead, something unexpected rose within him. Curiosity. A hunger for truth. and perhaps, in the shadows of his heart, a flicker of hope. He gave her an order, one that would change the fate of the galaxy forever. He commanded her not to hide, not to run, but to stay at his side. He told her to show him the truth, even if it meant the destruction of his empire. Yet danger grew. Whispers spread faster. Other dragons began to notice her strange presence, her scars, her impossible glow. Some feared her. Some plotted to kill her. And all the while, the marks across her back began to spread, stretching across her skin like veins of fire. She warned the Emperor in a voice heavy with sorrow, when the scars completed, she would no longer be herself. She would become the weapon his kind was created to fear. The Emperor's gaze burned like the heart of a star. He stepped closer, his decision carved into his voice like iron. "Then let it begin," he said. And with those words, the palace trembled, as if the galaxy itself had just taken a breath before the storm. The days after the Emperor's fateful command stretched long and heavy, as though the palace itself was holding its breath. The human maid who was no longer just a maid moved silently at his side, still carrying her buckets and cloth, still bowing her head like a servant, but now the Emperor's eyes followed her every step. He told no one of what he had seen, yet his silence was not enough to stop the rumors from spreading like smoke through the golden halls. The guards whispered of her glowing scars, of the way broken machines sparked to life when she brushed her fingers against them, of the way her shadow stretched strangely under the torchlight as if it belonged to someone else. The Dragon Emperor was not a ruler who entertained fear, yet in private he found himself pacing the throne room, his thoughts circling the same questions over and over. If she truly carried the code of the architects, if she truly bore the key to the first fire, then his empire was built on a secret foundation that could crumble at any moment. He had conquered star systems, commanded fleets of flame, and broken rebellions without hesitation, but this was different. This was not an enemy he could simply burn away. At night, when the halls grew quiet, he summoned her to stand before him. He asked her again what the scars would unlock, what weapon or truth they pointed toward. She raised her eyes just slightly, and he felt again the weight of something ancient pressing down on him. Her answer came softly, like a whisper carried on endless years. The key does not open only a weapon. It opens memory. It opens the chains. Those words lodged deep inside his mind, sharper than any blade. He pressed her further, demanding clarity, but she only bowed her head, as if she had already said more than she should. The following morning, the Emperor ordered his scholars, those few still trusted with the knowledge of history, to bring him all records of the time before the Dragon dynasty. They returned with fragments, ruins carved with symbols similar to those on her back, half-burned scrolls locked away in vaults, shards of metal from forgotten machines. They trembled as they presented these forbidden artifacts, afraid that even looking upon them was treason. As the Emperor studied them in secret, the truth began to crack through the lies his empire had always told. The designs, the codes, the images, all pointed to something undeniable. The dragons had not been born as rulers. They had been created. The Emperor sat on his throne of black stone, but for the first time, it felt like a cage. His people were proud, fierce, and certain of their eternal right to dominate. What would happen if they learned that they were only the children of another race's design? Would the empire collapse into chaos? Would his armies turn against him? Or worse, would they seek to kill the maid before the scars revealed the full truth? He thought of her words, keys, chains, memory. Was she here to destroy his kind, or to save them from something darker still? That night, a storm of fire raged outside the palace walls, the sky alive with lightning that danced across the golden spires. The maid stood alone in the rain, her simple robe clinging to her skin, the scars on her back glowing brighter than ever before. He approached her, his heavy steps echoing in the storm, and for the first time, he spoke not as an emperor but as a man. "If these scars finish their story, what will you become?" She turned her face toward him, the rain sliding down her cheeks like tears, though her expression was calm. "I will become what your kind fears most," she said softly. "The memory of their true beginning." The Emperor's chest tightened. He should have killed her then, ended the risk, silenced the whispers that had already begun to stir rebellion within the palace. But he could not. There was something inside her silence, something inside those scars, that he could not turn away from. She was not just a danger. She was also a doorway, and he had already stepped across its threshold. In the days that followed, loyal dragons began to grow uneasy. They noticed the emperor's strange attachment to the human maid. They noticed how often he summoned her in secret, how his eyes lingered on her instead of his generals. A council of advisers came to him, demanding an explanation. They warned him that trust in his rule was weakening, that whispers of betrayal were taking root. This human is a threat, they said. She must be removed before she poisons the empire. The emperor listened, his face carved in stone, but inside he felt the weight of an impossible choice. If he gave her up, the truth would die with her. If he protected her, he risked rebellion from his own kind. And then it happened. One night, a group of dragon nobles sent assassins into the palace. They crept through the corridors, their claws dipped in poison, their wings folded tight against the walls. They found her alone, scrubbing the floor outside the emperor's chamber. She did not scream when they struck. Instead, the scars on her back flared with blinding light. The walls shook. The assassins fell to their knees, clutching their heads, crying out as visions filled their minds. They saw cities they had never known, worlds before the empire, the face of the architects who had shaped their very blood. By the time the emperor arrived, the assassins lay unconscious on the floor, their eyes wide with terror. She stood in the center, untouched, glowing faintly as though the stars themselves had wrapped around her body. The emperor dismissed his guards and walked to her. He looked at the scars, now brighter, spreading across her skin like living fire. She met his gaze with that same unbroken calm. "You see now," she said quietly. "They fear me not because of what I am, but because of what I will remind them of." The emperor's jaw tightened, and for the first time, he placed his hand on her shoulder, not as a master, not as a ruler, but as an ally. "Then let them fear," he said. "You will not face this alone." But deep in his heart, he knew the danger was only beginning. The scars were still growing, the truth still locked within them, and the moment they fully awakened, the galaxy itself would tremble. The palace had become a silent battlefield. No war drums sounded, no armies marched, but every corner whispered with tension. The assassination attempt had failed, yet its echo lingered in the golden halls. Dragons of noble blood looked at the emperor with questioning eyes, and even his most loyal generals whispered behind closed doors. They could not understand why their ruler, who had once burned entire worlds for less, would keep a fragile human so close, a human who had defeated trained killers without raising a weapon. Some said she was a witch. Some swore she was a weapon. All agreed on one thing: her presence threatened the empire's order. The Dragon Emperor, however, had made his choice. He no longer saw her as a servant but as a storm hiding behind calm eyes. At night, when the scars on her back burned brighter, he sat across from her in the throne chamber, the firelight flickering between them. His voice was low, stripped of its usual authority. "These scars, they grow each day. What happens when they cover you completely?" She paused, her gaze steady but heavy, as though each word cost her a fragment of herself. "When the scars finish, I will no longer belong to myself. The architects will rise through me. Their memory, their will, their weapon, all will return." The emperor leaned back, his claws tightening on the armrest of his throne. The architects, beings of myth, creators of stars, lost to time. If her words were true, then she carried within her not just history, but the power to reshape the galaxy. And yet she spoke without pride, without hunger. She carried the truth as though it were a curse. He studied her in silence, then asked the question that haunted him most. "Do you want this power to awaken?" For the first time, he saw a flicker of pain in her calm eyes. "No," she whispered. "Because when it awakens, I will be gone." Those words carved themselves into his heart. She was not seeking to rule or to destroy, she was trying to hold on to the fragile thread of her own existence. The emperor, feared across galaxies, felt something strange then, something he had not felt since his youth. It was not pity. It was not weakness. It was recognition. She was carrying chains heavier than his throne, and he could not look away. But beyond the throne room, unrest grew louder. Dragons who had seen the glow of her scars muttered that their emperor was bewitched. The council pressed harder for her removal. Armies were restless, sensing cracks in the empire's foundation. The emperor gave no explanations, only orders. He ordered silence. He ordered loyalty. And when the council demanded her death, his roar shook the very pillars of the palace. "Touch her, and you will burn." The command stunned them into silence, but it also planted deeper seeds of rebellion. The maid remained at his side, still moving through the palace with quiet steps, but the air around her changed. Servants avoided her path. Guards refused to meet her eyes. Some spat curses under their breath when they thought she could not hear. Yet she never reacted. She continued to clean floors, polish weapons, and carry buckets of water as though she were still nothing more than a servant. But at night, when she removed her robe and the scars glowed across her back like rivers of fire, she could feel herself slipping away. One night, when the emperor found her staring at her reflection in a pool of black water, she spoke before he could. "Every day, more of me disappears. The scars are not just marks. They are rewriting me." Her voice trembled slightly, though her face remained calm. "When the last line is drawn, I will not even remember this conversation. I will be them. The architects. Their weapon. Their memory." She turned to him then, her voice steady again. "When that moment comes, will you kill me?" The emperor did not answer immediately. His claws curled at his sides, his mind torn between his duty to his people and the strange bond that had formed between them. Finally, he stepped closer, his voice low, almost human. "If you vanish, then I will burn the galaxy to bring you back." She looked at him with something unreadable in her eyes, but she said nothing. The silence between them carried more weight than words ever could. But fate did not wait for them to decide. Soon after, the Empire trembled under the arrival of a fleet from the outer systems, dragons loyal to no throne, rebels who claimed to serve the true history. They had heard the whispers of the maid with glowing scars, and they wanted her for themselves. They believed she was the chosen one who would awaken the power of the architects and break the Empire forever. Their ships, black as ash and edged with fire, surrounded the capital world. The emperor stood on the balcony of his palace, watching the burning horizon as the rebel fleet descended. He felt the weight of choice pressing down on him heavier than ever. To his left, his generals demanded that he hand the maid over, to use her as a bargaining chip or a weapon. To his right, she stood silently, her scars glowing brighter with each passing moment. Her presence was both the cause of the storm and the only path through it. As the rebel fleet's demands echoed through the palace halls, the emperor turned to her, his voice a low growl. "If I give you to them, they will unleash your power without care. If I keep you, my empire may burn from within. Tell me, maid, what should I choose?" She lifted her gaze to his, her calmness unbroken even as fire reigned outside. "Do not choose for your empire," she said softly. "Choose for the truth." The words struck him like lightning. The Dragon Emperor, who had always chosen power, conquest, and empire above all else, now faced a choice that was not about ruling at all. It was about truth, and truth had the power to destroy or to save. He turned back to the horizon, watching as the rebel ships drew closer, and his claws tightened around the stone railing until it cracked. The scars on her back flared like suns, lighting the night with a brilliance that made even the stars pale. The rebels thought they had come to take her. The council thought they could silence her. But in that moment, the emperor understood, no one could control what she carried. Not the rebels, not the council, not even himself. And yet, as the sky trembled with fire, he whispered into the storm, "Then let the galaxy hear the truth." The rebel fleet blotted out the stars above the Dragon Emperor's world, their blackened hulls glowing red with the heat of their engines. From the palace balconies, the fire-filled sky seemed to mirror the tension boiling inside the golden halls. The council begged for immediate surrender of the human maid. Generals swore that if she was not handed over, the rebels would rain fire until the capital itself was ash. But the emperor stood in silence, his wings folded behind him, his eyes fixed on the glow of her scars. The light from her back pulsed brighter than the torches, as though her very skin had become a living constellation. Inside the throne room, the council gathered, their voices sharp and desperate. "You cannot protect her any longer," one noble hissed. "She is no maid, she is a weapon, and the rebels know it. If you do not surrender her, they will destroy us all." Another slammed his claw against the floor. "You have already let her corrupt you. Look at your silence, look at your hesitation. The emperor we once followed would never risk the empire for a human servant." Their words were poison, heavy with rebellion, but the emperor listened without flinching. His gaze slid past them, falling instead on the girl kneeling at the base of his throne, scrubbing the black stone floor as if none of their fury concerned her. He raised one clawed hand, silencing the chamber instantly. His voice cut through the air like fire across dry wood. You see a weapon. I see a truth too great for your narrow sight. If you fear her, it is because your power is built on lies. She stays. The council erupted in anger, but his roar thundered louder, shaking the stone. She stays. No one dared to speak again. Yet as the nobles bowed and withdrew, their eyes burned with the promise of betrayal. That night, the emperor found her in the lower gardens of the palace, sitting among the glowing flowers that swayed in the warm night air. He stepped toward her, his shadow vast across the ground, but her calm gaze met his without fear. They will not stop, he said quietly. Not the rebels above, not the council within. You are the spark that will set this empire aflame. She lowered her eyes to the scars on her hands, faint lines glowing like threads of fire. I did not choose this. The architects carved their memory into me before time could erase them. Now their memory is waking, and when it fully awakens, I will no longer be me. The emperor's chest tightened, though his voice remained steady. If the architects return through you, what will they do? Her silence stretched long before she finally answered. They will judge. They will look upon what their creations have become. And they will decide if dragons deserve to survive. Her words were heavier than iron, and for a moment the emperor felt the ground shift beneath his power. He, the ruler of uncountable worlds, could do nothing to stop a destiny carved into the flesh of a single fragile human. He clenched his claws, his voice low. And if their judgment is death? Her eyes lifted to his, still calm, still carrying centuries of silence. Then you must choose whether to fight them, or to let the truth burn everything you have built. The following day, the rebel fleet opened fire on the capital's defenses. Towers of flame lit the skies, and the city below shook as the first bombardments tore through the outer walls. Citizens screamed and scattered through the streets, while soldiers scrambled to mount their counterattack. From the highest balcony, the emperor watched as the heavens themselves seemed to fall apart. The maid stood at his side, the scars along her arms now glowing openly, no longer hidden by cloth. She spoke softly, almost to herself, though he heard her clearly. They come not for conquest, but for revelation. They want me to awaken. A sudden blast shook the palace, sending dust raining from the ceiling. Generals rushed into the throne room, begging the emperor for orders. We cannot hold them for long. Give them what they want. Give them the human. Their desperate cries filled the hall, but the emperor's command was iron. No, his wings spread wide, his voice carrying through every corridor. She is under my protection. Any who raise a claw against her, raise it against me. The generals hesitated, torn between loyalty and survival. Some lowered their heads in reluctant obedience. Others slipped away in silence, already planning betrayal. That night, as the city burned and the rebel fleet pressed closer, the emperor stood once more before the maid in the empty throne room. The glow of her scars painted the walls in shifting light, like stars spilling into patterns only she could understand. He asked her again, his voice quieter this time, almost human, if I stand with you, if I protect you against all of them, will you stand with me when the architects rise through you? Her gaze lingered on him, and for the first time there was a flicker of something in her eyes, not just calm, not just burden, but sorrow. When they rise, I will not be here to give you my answer. The emperor stepped closer, his shadow falling across her, his claws flexing as if to hold her to this world. Then I will command them as I command all things. And if they do not bow, I will burn the stars themselves. For the first time since he had met her, the corners of her lips trembled, almost forming a smile, though it vanished before it could fully appear. You cannot command what created you, she whispered. But perhaps you can remind them what you have become. Outside, the rebel fleet prepared for one final assault. Inside, the council gathered in secret chambers, plotting to overthrow their emperor before dawn. And in the center of it all, the human maid's scars flared brighter, lines of fire racing across her skin faster than ever before. Her time was running short. The memory of the architects was waking, and with it came the judgment of all dragonkind. As the first blasts shook the palace walls, the emperor raised his voice over the thunder of war. His words were not for his generals or his council, but for her alone. Then let them come. Let the architects rise. But know this, whether God, ghost, or creator, nothing will take you from my side." And as fire rained from the skies, the maid's glowing scars pulsed in answer, a heartbeat of light that seemed to echo through the galaxy itself. The night sky above the capital was no longer a sky at all, it was a battlefield. The rebel fleet poured fire into the heavens, their ships black silhouettes against rivers of flame. Towers crumbled in the distance, and the screams of citizens echoed faintly even within the thick walls of the Emperor's palace. Inside the throne room, the Dragon Emperor stood tall, his wings unfurled like a shadow that reached to the ceiling. At his side, the human maid remained kneeling, the glow of her scars now too bright to hide. The light traced across her arms, her shoulders, her back, forming shifting patterns that looked less like wounds and more like living constellations. The generals were gathered before him, demanding once again that he hand her over. "This is no longer your decision alone," one of them growled, his scales flaring red with anger. "The Empire itself is at risk. She belongs to the architects, not to you. Give her to the rebels before the city burns." The Emperor's eyes burned with fire, his voice calm but sharper than a blade. "You dare tell me who belongs to whom? She is mine, as this empire is mine. No rebel, no council, and no forgotten gods will take her while I still draw breath." His roar filled the throne room, and the very walls trembled with its power. Some generals bowed in silence, but others exchanged glances that spoke of treachery. The seeds of rebellion had already been sown, and he knew it. That night, he found her in the hidden chamber beneath the palace, a place carved deep into the stone where the oldest relics of the dragon race were kept. Ancient weapons lined the walls, their fire long extinguished, and broken machines from the first wars of conquest rested in silence. She stood in the center, her scars glowing enough to light the room on their own. He watched her for a moment, the weight of centuries pressing against his mind. Finally, he stepped forward, his claws clicking against the stone floor. "I will not give you to them," he said, his voice quieter now. "But if I keep you here, the Empire will tear itself apart from within. The Council plots against me already. The rebels scream at the gates. Soon, even my armies will waver. If I am to protect you, I must make a choice that no ruler has ever made." She lifted her gaze to him, calm and unreadable. "And what choice is that?" The Emperor's shadow stretched across the chamber as he spoke. "I will go against my own empire. Against the lies my ancestors built. Against the dragons themselves, if I must. I command you, not as your master, but as your ally, take me to the truth. Show me the architect's memory, even if it destroys me." Her eyes widened slightly, a flicker of surprise breaking through her stillness. For centuries, she had carried the burden of silence, hiding the scars, waiting for the moment they would consume her. Never had anyone asked to share it. She bowed her head, her voice soft but firm. "If you walk this path, there is no return. When the memory awakens fully, it will change everything, your empire, your people, your throne." The Emperor stepped closer, lowering his voice until only she could hear. "Then let it change. An empire built on lies cannot stand forever. If truth is the fire that burns it down, so be it. I would rather fall to truth than rule in chains." For the first time since he had discovered her scars, she let out a breath that sounded almost like relief. The light across her back pulsed brighter, responding to his words as though the scars themselves recognized his choice. She turned to the relics on the walls, her hand brushing against one of the broken machines. Instantly, it hummed to life, sparks of blue fire racing through its veins. Dust fell from its frame, and for a moment, the chamber seemed to awaken. She looked back at him, her expression solemn. "Then we begin." In the days that followed, the palace became a nest of shadows. By day, the Emperor pretended to rule as always, holding council meetings, giving orders, keeping the illusion of power intact. But by night, he descended into the hidden chambers with her, unlocking pieces of the architect's memory hidden in the relics and in the scars on her body. Each night, her light grew brighter, and with it came visions, flashes of a time before the dragons, before the Empire, when the architects shaped stars with their hands and wove life across galaxies like threads in a loom. The visions showed dragons as hatchlings in glass cradles, not born but created, their fire forged as weapons, their wings designed to wage war. The Emperor watched in silence, his claws digging into the stone as the truth seared itself into his soul. His people had not been rulers by destiny. They had been soldiers built for someone else's war. One night, After a vision left him trembling with rage, he turned to her, his eyes blazing. Why show me this? Why burden me with this truth? If the scars unlock the memory, then let it awaken fully. Let it speak to all dragons, not just me. She shook her head, her voice soft but firm. Because the moment it awakens fully, I will no longer exist. I will be the architects. Their voice. Their judgment. If that happens, you will not have me, you will only have them. The Emperor's fire dimmed slightly, his chest tightening at her words. He had not realized until then how much her presence had rooted itself inside him. She was not just the key to an ancient truth. She was herself, quiet, burdened, strong in her silence. The thought of losing her to the memory struck him harder than any battle wound he had ever carried. Above them, the war worsened. The rebels pushed deeper, and the council's betrayal grew bold. Assassins struck in the night, soldiers deserted, and flames spread through the outer cities. The empire was breaking, piece by piece. Yet the emperor did not bend. Instead, he gathered only a handful of loyal guards and commanded them to prepare for a journey beyond the capital, beyond even the empire's core. We seek the architect's cradle, he told them, the place where dragons were born. His generals protested, but his voice thundered over theirs, this is my command. Obey, or burn. And so, as the skies above the capital burned, the Dragon Emperor and the Maid prepared to leave on a secret mission, a journey into the forgotten corners of the galaxy where the first truth still slept. It was a choice that would mark the beginning of the end, not just for the Empire, but for the galaxy itself. The Dragon Emperor's flagship cut through the void like a blade, its vast wings of black steel burning against the stars. Behind it trailed a small escort of loyal ships, fewer than a dozen, all that remained truly faithful to him. The rest of the Empire was in chaos. The rebels had claimed half the outer systems, and the council in the capital had declared him unfit to rule. But the Emperor paid no heed to their betrayal. His focus was fixed on one thing alone, the journey to the place the Maid called the Cradle. She stood beside him on the command deck, her plain robes torn and darkened from the battles they had left behind. Yet no one looking at her could call her plain anymore. The scars on her skin had spread across her arms, her shoulders, her back, her chest, lines of fire forming constellations that pulsed with light, bright enough to cast shadows even in the darkness of the ship. She carried herself silently, but the crew avoided her as if she were a living storm. Some bowed their heads in fear when she passed. Others whispered prayers to gods they had long forgotten. The Emperor watched her closely. Each day, more of the girl seemed to vanish, replaced by something larger, heavier, older. He remembered her words, when the scars complete, I will no longer be me. And though he had steeled himself against armies and assassins, this truth struck him harder than any blade. He did not want to lose her. Not the girl who had scrubbed his throne room floors without complaint. Not the girl whose silence had shaken him more than rebellion. Not the girl who had taught him that even emperors could fear the truth. After weeks of travel through forgotten star routes, they reached it, a world hidden in the shadow of a collapsed star. It was no ordinary planet. It was an enormous structure, a shell of black stone and silver veins, pulsing faintly like a heart. The Cradle. The place where dragons had first been forged. As the ship descended through the dark clouds that swirled around it, the Maid's scars blazed like suns. She trembled, her knees weakening, her voice thin but steady. This is where it will happen. This is where the memory will awaken. The Emperor caught her before she fell, his claws surprisingly gentle as he steadied her. Then we face it together, he said. But she shook her head, her breath shallow. You do not understand. When the last mark is written, there will be no together. There will only be them. Her eyes searched his, calm yet sorrowful. Promise me this, if I am gone, do not let the architects use me to destroy what you love. His fire-lit eyes narrowed. If they rise through you, then I will face them as I face all enemies. But I will not kill you. She opened her mouth to speak, but her body stiffened suddenly, her scars blazing with violent light. The ground beneath them shook, and the air filled with a hum that seemed to come from the stars themselves. The Cradle had awakened. Vast towers of black stone rose from the planet's surface, glowing with the same symbols carved into her flesh. The sky split with lightning as if the universe itself were opening an old wound. The Emperor drew his blade of molten fire, ready for war. But no enemy appeared. Instead, a voice filled the air, not from any throat, but from everywhere at once. Deep, resonant, ancient. Our children have forgotten. Our weapons rule themselves. Our chains are broken. Memory must return. The maid cried out, falling to her knees as the scars completed their pattern, wrapping around her body until no untouched skin remained. Her eyes glowed with blinding light, and when she lifted her head again, it was not her voice that spoke, but the architects themselves. We are the first fire. Through her, we awaken. You, Dragon Emperor, were made for war. Your kind is a mistake left unchecked. Now judgment comes. The Emperor stepped forward, his blade blazing, his wings spread wide. His voice thundered against the stars. No, I am no one's mistake. I am no one's weapon. I am Emperor, and I choose my fate. The architects laughed through her lips, a sound like breaking stone. You choose nothing. You were created to burn, and burn you will. The towers flared, and the ground split open, releasing streams of molten fire. The sky rained lightning that struck the rebel ships circling above, tearing them apart like paper. The crew on the Emperor's flagship screamed in terror, bowing low as if gods had descended. But the Emperor did not bow. He walked toward her glowing form, each step shaking the ground. If you are the architects, then listen to me. You gave us fire, wings, and hunger for conquest. But you did not give us will. That, we found ourselves. You see dragons as weapons, but we have built empires, written laws, forged love, and carried burdens you could never imagine. We are not your tools. We are not your children. We are something you cannot control. The light in her body flared, bright enough to blind. The voice of the architects roared, then prove it. Survive our fire, or be erased from the stars. The cradle erupted, sending waves of destructive energy across the surface. Ships above fell from the sky, shattered like glass. The Emperor raised his blade high, its fire clashing against the architect's storm. The air was filled with the roar of dragon against creator, a sound so vast it seemed to tear the galaxy open. For a moment, within the blinding light, the maid's true voice broke through. Weak, fragile, but her own. Emperor, if you want me back, don't fight them with fire. Fight them with truth. The light threatened to consume her again, but he seized her shoulders, his voice raw and fierce. Then hear my truth. You are not just a key. You are not just a scar. You are mine. And I will not let you go. The ground shook, the sky split, and the architects screamed as if struck by something they had never known before, defiance born of love, not war. The maid's light flickered, wavered, then steadied, no longer wholly theirs, no longer wholly his, but balanced between. And as the storm raged across the cradle, the galaxy itself seemed to wait, holding its breath for what would come next, destruction or rebirth.